Hello, my name is Reagan. When I was 17, I collapsed in front of my entire family, right in the middle of my mother's birthday party. They said I was being dramatic. They said I craved attention. But the truth was, arthritis was already tearing through my hip, and my mother had been hiding the MRI results for years. She didn't just ignore my pain, she silenced it, rewrote it, turned it into a family joke. And now, after everything, they want to come back. They want forgiveness. But how do you forgive the people who let you fall and then laughed when you hit the floor? I've told this story so many times now that people assume I've become numb to it. The truth is, each time I revisit that night, I still feel the weight of the carpet under my knees, the sharp sting of whispers around me, and the silence that followed after the laughter died down. I was 17 then, still trying to hold myself together in a family that insisted nothing was wrong with me. Tonight, I'm older, early 30s, and I can tell the story with the clarity of hindsight. But back then, I was just the youngest daughter, the one who couldn't measure up. It was my mother Vera's birthday. She had decided to throw a big gathering at our suburban house in Austin. Our home wasn't extravagant, but that night, it seemed like every square foot was filled with voices. My aunts and uncles filled the living room, cousins chased each other down the hallway, and neighbors stopped by with wine bottles and cake. Vera loved when the house buzzed like that. She thrived on being admired. I sat quietly at the edge of the dining table, trying not to draw attention. Every shift in my chair sent a sharp ache through my hip, a pain that had been gnawing at me for years. I had learned to hide my discomfort, mask it with tight smiles and shallow breaths, but sitting there for hours while the adults toasted and laughed made the ache nearly unbearable. I crossed my legs, uncrossed them again, trying to find a position that didn't feel like fire running down my leg. A cousin noticed. She whispered to another, and the sideways glances began. That was the way it always went. They looked at me like I was delicate, but not in a kind way, more like I was the nuisance of the family, the one who brought unease to the party. I could almost hear their thoughts. There she goes again, making it about herself. The speeches started. My uncle tapped a spoon on his glass, and the room quieted as he praised Vera, her sacrifices, her strength, her impeccable reputation. I forced a smile, but inside, I was fighting my own body. When I rose to add my applause, my legs gave way beneath me. The fall was sudden. 1 second I was standing, the next I was crumpled on the carpet. Gasps filled the room, followed by a murmur of voices that cut sharper than the pain itself. She's doing it again, I heard one aunt mutter. Such a drama queen, another added. 17 years old and still acting like a child. I looked up, cheeks burning. Above me, my sister Callista stood perfectly composed, her dress sparkling in the warm light. She didn't rush to help. Instead, she pulled her phone out, angling it slightly. The smirk on her face told me she'd caught the moment she'd been waiting for. My cousin, not far behind her, already had his camera pointed at me too. Within minutes, I knew, my stumble would become entertainment. The laughter was quiet at first, nervous chuckles that spread like wildfire. Callista leaned toward one of my cousins and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. She'll never grow out of it, always needing attention. I pushed against the floor, trying to stand, but my hip locked, sending a jolt that forced me back down. That's when my mother bent down, her face close to mine, her voice sharp enough to cut. Get up. Stop embarrassing us. Callista never acted like this. Do you understand me? Her words burned more than the pain in my hip. She didn't say them loudly, but she didn't need to. I knew exactly what she meant. To her, I was a liability. My pain wasn't real. It was weakness, something to hide, to scold, to bury. She straightened herself quickly and, in the same breath, praised Callista. Look at her, she announced to the guests, patting Callista's arm proudly. She's always been steady, never gave me trouble. The room nodded along. No one questioned it. They never did. I felt invisible, crushed under the weight of my mother's comparison. It was always the same script. Callista the star, Reagan the shadow. Every time I faltered, Callista shone brighter. I finally managed to drag myself back to the chair. No one reached down to help. No one even asked if I was all right. They looked away, as though ignoring me could erase the awkwardness. The chatter soon returned to Vera's birthday, the laughter swelling louder than before. Inside, I wasn't crying, not anymore. I had learned long ago that tears gave them more ammunition. Instead, I sat silently, my fists clenched under the table, the documents of humiliation etched into my memory. That night, as they laughed at my expense, I whispered to myself, this was the last time I'd let them write my story. The rest of that night moved like molasses, slow and thick, every second dragging my body deeper into itself. My room felt colder than usual, even though the thermostat hadn't changed. I shut the door, not quite slamming it, but not gently either. Somewhere downstairs, the laughter continued, muffled but unmistakable. Glasses clinking, more toasts. I could swear I heard Callista say, "She always does this, steals the spotlight." That voice, always polished, always in control, now felt like sandpaper against my skin. I laid back on my bed, still in the same outfit from earlier, one shoe off, one dangling from my toes. My hip pulsed with pain in waves, the kind that didn't scream but stayed just loud enough to keep you from forgetting. It was the same pain I had been trying to explain for years, the same one they had told me was in my head. From upstairs, I could hear the heels of my mother's shoes on the hardwood floor, her voice floating up in pieces. "It's just attention-seeking. I mean, come on. Who collapses over sitting too long?" Someone laughed. Another chimed in. "She's always been sensitive." That word, sensitive, it was their favorite excuse. I rolled over and stared at the ceiling. If I was faking, then why did it feel like someone had driven a nail into my hip and twisted it every time I moved? Why did I wince when I got out of bed? Why had I missed so many soccer games, dance rehearsals, school trips? I wasn't weak. I wasn't dramatic. I was in pain. And they didn't want to see it. As the voices below finally began to fade, and the house settled into that post-party stillness, leftover food on countertops, stray cups abandoned on side tables, I stood up slowly and walked over to my desk. My mind was racing, and no amount of silence was going to help. I needed something. Proof. A reason. Anything. That's when I remembered it. A few months back, I had seen my mother lock away some papers in the small steel box she kept in the study. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Vera was always storing tax papers, old report cards, medical forms. But tonight, my instincts screamed at me. That box had the answers. I waited until the house was truly asleep. Callista's door closed, no hallway creaks, no bathroom flushes. I pulled on a hoodie, slipped out of my room, and crept toward the study. The hallway light flickered once, and I paused. Every creak beneath my feet felt exaggerated in the silence. The scent of my mother's perfume lingered faintly in the air, something floral, artificial, always too strong. The study door wasn't locked as usual. I eased it open and stepped inside. Her steel box was still on the bottom shelf behind the desk. I crouched down and reached for it, my fingers trembling. The lock stared back at me. Nothing high-tech, just a basic key turn. My heart pounded. I remembered the spare key. Years ago, I had seen Vera slip it into the back of a drawer lined with her old greeting cards. I rifled through them now. Birthday cards from coworkers, Mother's Day cards from Callista with perfect handwriting, and finally found it taped underneath one envelope. The key turned with a soft click. I held my breath as I opened the lid. Inside were neat stacks of documents, folders labeled in her perfect handwriting. Medical, Reagan. My name. My chest tightened. I flipped through until one report caught my eye. It was dated 2 years ago, my sophomore year. The top page read, MRI findings, signs of hip dysplasia, and early onset arthritis. I blinked hard, trying to focus as the words swam before me. There was more. A physician's recommendation. Immediate surgical consultation advised. Early intervention critical to prevent long-term mobility issues. And beneath that, a consent form, signed and dated. Not by me, not even near me. Parent declines surgical recommendation. Signed, Vera Langford. I stared at her signature, bold and clean and confident. My fingers tightened around the page. I wasn't angry in the way people expect, There was no yelling, no sudden crash of books or papers. It was a slow fury, the kind that settles into your bones like winter cold. She had known. She had known. For 2 years, she had watched me limp through life, cry after school, quit everything I loved, and she had known. She didn't just ignore my pain, she chose not to treat it, because treating it meant facing the truth. And the truth didn't fit the image she worked so hard to maintain. I sat back on the carpet, box open beside me, pages fanned out like broken wings. Around me, the room stayed perfectly still. The only sound was my breath, shallow and sharp. In that moment, I remembered all the times she told me I was being dramatic, all the mornings I couldn't stand straight without gripping the wall, all the birthday parties where Callista danced in heels, and I sat on the sidelines, chewing through another round of ibuprofen like it was candy. Every insult, every dismissal, every comparison crashed into me like a wave. She had picked her pride over my pain, her image over my body. I clutched the papers to my chest, and something inside me cracked, not in a broken way, but like a seam finally coming apart after holding too much for too long. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. They could laugh. They could roll their eyes. But the truth sat in my lap now, printed in black ink, signed by my own mother. This ends here. They can spin their stories at dinner parties, pretend I'm just the weak one. But this time, they don't get the last word. This time, I do. Tucked under those papers was something I had never seen before, a sealed envelope with my father's handwriting. I sat there for a long while, the document still spread around me like the aftermath of a storm. My eyes couldn't stop drifting back to the sealed envelope buried beneath it all. Cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges, and unmistakably addressed in my father's handwriting. The weight of it in my hand felt disproportionate to its size. It was heavier than any birthday card, thicker than a simple note. I turned it over slowly, as if afraid the paper might tear at my touch. I hadn't seen his handwriting in over a decade. Dad passed away when I was 15. His death was a quiet one, an unexpected heart failure that left us more confused than grieving. Vera took charge of the funeral, the estate, and every single piece of memory that had once belonged to him. It was as if she decided that remembering him would slow us down. So, we didn't. But I remembered everything. I remembered the way he used to sneak me peanut M&Ms after my orthodontist appointments. I remembered him yelling louder than anyone else at my first piano recital, even though I missed 3 notes and ran off stage. And now I remembered his voice, not how it sounded, but what it felt like safety, like truth. I broke the seal gently and unfolded the letter. Reagan, if you're reading this, then something in your gut told you to look where no one else wanted you to. And that means you're still the girl I knew, curious, stubborn, brave. I wish I could say this to your face. I wish I had more time. But if life robbed me of that, at least I can leave you this. You are not weak. Don't let anyone call you dramatic or sensitive or fragile. Don't let their voices drown out the truth of what you feel inside your own body and mind. If one day you fall and no one helps you up, know that I always believed you were stronger than they said. Love always, Dad. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, absorbing every word like they were drops of water in a desert I'd been crawling through for years. The room around me blurred, the past and present folding into each other. All the moments I'd doubted myself, all the times I replayed their dismissals in my head, suddenly cracked open, because here it was. Someone had believed me, and not just someone. He had. The next morning came slowly. I hadn't slept, but I heard the clinking of dishes downstairs. Vera was already up, pretending nothing had happened the night before, as always. I tucked the letter carefully back into the envelope and slid it under the liner of my desk drawer, behind an old jewelry box she never noticed. By late afternoon, Vera began moving through the house with purpose. I heard closet doors opening, plastic tubs being dragged from under beds, boxes sliding across the attic floor. Decluttering, she called it. When she walked past my room holding a cardboard box marked David's Things, my heart dropped. You don't need that, I said quietly from my doorway. She didn't look at me. We need to let go of the past. It's time. I followed her. She stopped at the base of the attic stairs, setting the box down. It wasn't taped shut yet. I moved past her and climbed up, my legs shaky but firm with purpose. In the dusty attic corner sat a pile of boxes, some from when I was a child, some labeled with dates and vague words like papers and Miss Key. I rifled through them until I found what I was looking for. The lid came off easily. Inside were fragments of a life no one but me seemed to care about. A photo of Dad and me at the county fair, his old leather wallet, a tiny music trophy with my name etched into the base. First place, elementary piano recital. I didn't even remember winning that one. And then there were the journals. His handwriting again, this time less formal, more fluid. Observations, quotes, doodles, and a few entries about me. Reagan seems off today. Says her legs hurt after gym. Vera says it's growing pains, but I don't buy it. She tried to skip piano practice. Said her hips ached. Vera rolled her eyes. I saw her wince just trying to sit. I clutched the notebook to my chest. When I came down with the box in my arms, Vera stood at the foot of the attic stairs with her arms crossed. What are you doing with that? These were Dad's. You don't get to decide they're garbage. I said it's time to move on. No, I said firmly. You moved on. I haven't, and I won't let you erase him. She didn't respond, but her eyes narrowed. You're being unreasonable. There it was again. That word. Another weapon in her vocabulary. I stepped past her and walked back to my room, heart pounding. My hands shook as I set the box down beside my bed. That night, I opened the notebook again. I read every word my father had scribbled about me. The small things. The things only a parent paying attention would notice. The signs of someone who wasn't trying to dismiss a child's pain, but understand it. I held the letter in one hand and the journal in the other. She erased your voice, I whispered, but I'm not letting her erase mine. I didn't know exactly what came next, but something had shifted, something permanent. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about a man whose belief in his daughter had been packed into a dusty box and shoved into an attic like he never existed. It was about every child who had ever been told they were too much, too emotional, too sensitive. I was done being dismissed. I was going to find every truth they tried to bury, and I would make sure the world heard every word. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of her silence. I was ready to break it. After reading my father's letter, something in me settled, like a piece finally found its place in a broken puzzle. I didn't fall apart that night because I had something stronger to hold on to than grief. I had his belief. That belief didn't erase the years of being ignored or the pain I still carried every time I stood too long, but it gave me the fire I'd been missing. It made me look back, not just emotionally, but literally, into memories I had tried to suppress. One in particular kept scratching at the back of my mind like a loose nail I couldn't stop tripping over. It was sophomore year. I had just started seeing the school doctor for ongoing pain. Dr. Patel, gentle, no nonsense, kind in that quiet way that made you trust him. I remembered sitting on the examination table with my left leg dangling, answering his questions honestly for once, not minimizing what I felt. He pressed gently around my hip and looked up at me with a furrowed brow that said more than his words ever could. "This isn't growing pains, Reagan," he told me. "You need a full scan, possibly an MRI. If you were my daughter, I'd have that scheduled by next week." I left the clinic that day with hope. It wasn't excitement, I was terrified. But for once, someone had taken me seriously. And then nothing happened. No appointment, no paperwork, no follow-up. Weeks passed. I asked my mother once if she had received anything from the school clinic, but she waved me off. "He's overreacting," she said. "You've always been sensitive. One small ache and suddenly you think you need a surgeon?" I dropped it. I always dropped it. But now, sitting at my desk with my father's words echoing in my ears, I logged into my old school email account, the one I hadn't used since graduation. Most of it was spam and outdated links, but buried deep in the inbox was an email from Dr. Patel, unread. Subject, follow-up, urgent imaging, recommended for Reagan Marlowe. It was dated 3 days after our visit. The body of the message listed his concerns and a request for Vera to respond with permission for referral. My breath caught as I scrolled further. Just beneath that email, one marked as forwarded from Vera's personal account to Dr. Myers, our family doctor, her friend. Thanks for the concern. I'll have Reagan seen privately. She tends to dramatize discomfort. We're managing it. I stared at the screen. Dr. Myers. Of course. The man who never touched my leg, never ran a single test, and told me to stay active, stretch more, and stop overthinking. I could practically hear his voice even now. What you're feeling is probably just residual stiffness from puberty. Hormones can make everything seem worse. My hands shook. She had intercepted the care I was supposed to receive. She shut it down, redirected it to someone who would tell her exactly what she wanted to hear, that her daughter was fine, that her daughter was lying, that her daughter was someone she didn't need to worry about. It was calculated. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was control. By early evening, I had printed both emails and added them to a folder I had begun organizing. Each page slipped neatly into a clear sleeve like pieces of evidence. And then came the broadcast. I didn't know about it until Isolde called. "Have you seen Channel 4?" she asked, voice tense. "No. Why?" "Callista's on there." "Talking about you." My stomach dropped. I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local station. The set was familiar. Couch, mugs with logos, warm lighting that made everything look like a friendly neighborhood chat. But there, sitting cross-legged in a pale pink dress, was Callista. Her legs perfectly crossed, hair pinned to perfection. She was laughing. "She's always been a little dramatic," she said, tilting her head toward the host. "Ever since we were kids, every fall turned into a near-death experience. I remember one time she tripped getting out of the car and told Mom she couldn't walk for 3 days. But then I caught her dancing in her room. The audience laughed. The host chuckled politely. Sounds like she knew how to get attention." "She loved attention," Callista agreed, grinning. My ears rang. This wasn't just teasing. This was public dismissal. This was a broadcast version of every whispered conversation at every dinner table, every family barbecue, every moment I walked into a room and felt the air shift around me, and it was being reinforced, on record. Callista, with her spotless image, was shaping my story in front of strangers, painting me as unstable, untrustworthy, the younger sister who couldn't be taken seriously. I turned off the TV before the segment ended. The next morning, I walked into the coffee shop near our neighborhood, trying to clear my head. An older woman who lived 3 doors down gave me a tight smile and leaned into the woman beside her. "That's her," she whispered, not quietly enough, "the one with all those stories." Another replied, "Poor Vera. It must be so hard dealing with that kind of child." I clenched my jaw and kept walking. The pain in my hip flared with every step, but I didn't let it show. I wouldn't give them that. Back at home, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the folder in my hands. It felt too thin to carry the weight of what had been done to me, but it was a start. That evening, I called Isolde. She came over with snacks and no questions. Just presence. We sat on the floor, surrounded by papers. Why would she do it? I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. Because to people like her, Isolde said, appearance is more important than truth. I'm so tired of being the one who's too much. Then stop explaining, she said. Start showing. I looked down at the folder in my lap, the letter from my father sticking out slightly. They made me the villain, I said. On purpose. Isolde nodded. Then it's time to make sure the world knows what really happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hands steady now. If they wanted the world to see me as a fraud, then I would make sure the world saw them for who they truly were. It happened during breakfast, of all things. Nothing fancy. Just toast, lukewarm coffee, and that unspoken tension that clung to our kitchen like the smell of burnt eggs. Vera had already been pacing since 6:30, rearranging coffee cups no one was using, checking her phone more times than necessary. I could feel it coming, the way she hovered near the table, the way her gaze darted to me, then away, like I was a stain on a white tablecloth she couldn't bleach out. I hadn't said a word yet. Neither had Isolde, who'd stayed over again last night and now sat across from me, quietly buttering her toast. She'd learned, like I had, when to go silent in this house. Then came the trigger. "You didn't clean the dishes last night," Vera snapped, arms crossed like she was delivering a verdict. "I don't care how much your leg hurts. You're not a guest here. You're not an invalid." I blinked at her, not because I was shocked, because I'd heard it all before, but because of how numb I felt. My body ached, my head throbbed, but my mouth stayed closed. That silence pushed her further. "I'm so tired of walking on eggshells around your moods. Everyone else gets on with their lives, Reagan. But you've made suffering your full-time job." Still, I said nothing. Isolde reached for her mug, moving as slowly as possible. Her phone sat face down on the placemat, untouched. She didn't make eye contact with either of us. Vera leaned closer across the table, her voice lower, colder. "You embarrass this family. You just want people to feel sorry for you. That's all this is. A constant plea for attention." She straightened up, sighed like she was the victim, and stormed off toward the hallway, heels clicking against the floor as she went to call someone, likely one of her friends she could vent to. Isolde didn't move for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone, glanced at the screen, and held it up to show me. Voice memo, 3 minutes, 42 seconds. She hadn't meant to record it, at least not at first, but somewhere around Vera's third insult, she had tapped the button. Out of reflex or instinct, I didn't know. What I did know was that it was all there. Every word, every tone. She handed me the phone without saying a word. I listened to it once, headphones in, my heart thudding louder than the voice in my ears. Hearing her say those things again, not as memory, not as a twisted retelling, but exactly as they had happened, wasn't just validating. It was terrifying. It wasn't just my word anymore. Anyone could hear it now. Later that afternoon, I needed to find an old transcript from school. My mom kept files on everything, tax returns, birth certificates, old report cards, and usually stored them on the family desktop in the den. She'd been out running errands, and I figured I could grab what I needed before she got back. I navigated the folders quickly, but one of them caught my eye, tucked deep inside the Documents directory. It was titled Drafts Personal. Something about that label felt off. Vera wasn't the type to label anything personal. She was the type to name files things like Q2 taxes confirmed or insurance coverage 2021 final. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the folder. Inside were several Word documents. Most were empty or half-finished notes, but one had my name in the file title, just letter Reagan. I clicked. It wasn't a letter. It was an unsent email, addressed to someone named Linda M., whose name I didn't recognize. It began with polite small talk, then shifted quickly. "If this gets out, I'm ruined. Everything I've worked to build, my standing, my image, gone. I should have told Reagan years ago. But she was never strong, not enough to handle it. She spirals. You know how she is. It would have broken her." I didn't know what I expected to find in that draft. Maybe some hidden maternal guilt, some confession that she regretted her decisions because they hurt me. But there wasn't a single line in that email about my health, or my pain, or my life. It was all about her. I closed the document and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. I wasn't the daughter she was protecting. I was the mess she was trying to hide. That evening, I waited. I waited for the right moment, not to scream, not to accuse, but to state facts. That's what she valued, wasn't it? Clarity, structure, control. She walked into the living room after dinner, wine glass in hand, calm as always. I stood by the fireplace, phone in hand, ready. "One more time," I said quietly. "You call me a liar, and I will make sure everyone hears exactly what you sound like when the world isn't watching." She blinked. Just once. Then that smile, tight and thin, appeared like clockwork. "Oh, sweetheart, no one would believe that. They know you. They know your history." I stepped closer, still calm. Then I guess it's a good thing I have the receipts. She rolled her eyes, laughed like I was 13 again, like I was making a scene over the wrong dinner order. You don't have anything, she said, sipping her wine. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. She walked away, unfazed. But inside, I was steady, grounded in something she couldn't touch anymore. This wasn't about yelling. This wasn't about proving I could win a screaming match. This was about power. And now, for the first time, I had it. She thought I was bluffing, but the next piece of evidence would tear her image apart. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was anxious or afraid. Those feelings had passed their expiration date months ago. I stayed up because I was finally gathering the pieces, and each one was sharper than the last. The morning came slow, like it knew I wasn't in a rush to meet it. I brewed coffee, skipped breakfast, and shut myself in the tiny home office I'd set up in the corner of my room. I pulled my laptop close and stared at the blinking cursor on the login screen. It was time to look where she never wanted me to look. I still had access to my old school email, the one I used in high school and for a bit in college, before Vera insisted I migrate everything to the family-safe domain she set up for me. I typed in the username and waited for the password autofill to catch. When it didn't, I dug through my old journals until I found the sticky note I'd written it on, stuck between pages of a notebook filled with teenage scribbles and half-written poems. When I got in, I didn't find much at first. Most of the inbox was cluttered with generic school updates and outdated class schedules, but then, like a ghost rising from the dust, I saw it. Subject: Urgent. Reagan Marlowe. Follow-up recommendation. It was from Dr. Patel. The timestamp read, April 7th, 20XX, nearly 7 years ago. The preview line said, please respond regarding MRI authorization. I clicked. Inside, it was short and direct. He had recommended immediate imaging after my in-school exam. He expressed concern over what he suspected were early symptoms of hip dysplasia. If left untreated, he wrote, this could result in long-term mobility impairment. He asked Vera to confirm scheduling preferences. I had never seen this email, not once. Below that was a follow-up message from Dr. Patel, this one sent a week later, CCing a different address, Vera's personal Gmail. It simply read, second attempt to reach you regarding Reagan's imaging. Attached were the same documents, same warning, same urgency. And then I found it. A forwarded message, Vera's reply to Dr. Myers, her longtime friend and physician. It read, I've seen Dr. Patel's emails. Frankly, he's overreacting. Reagan tends to exaggerate pain and anxiety. I'd prefer to manage her care through someone who knows our family better. That's when it hit me. This wasn't ignorance. It was intentional redirection, a cover-up. My mother had intercepted a legitimate medical concern and rerouted it through a family friend who would echo her version of the truth. And he did. Dr. Myers never examined me, never scheduled anything, just told me to take over-the-counter pain relief and stay active. I felt it then, not just betrayal, but a bone-deep chill. She didn't just ignore the red flags, she erased them. Later that week, a letter from my insurance provider arrived. It came in one of those official white envelopes with the barcode window, impersonal and clinical. I opened it thinking it was a billing update, but the content stopped me mid-step. This is to confirm the processed reimbursement of $14,830 for imaging, consultation, and medication related to patient Reagan Marlowe, authorized by signature on file. $14,000. I never received imaging. I never saw a specialist. I hadn't been given anything stronger than ibuprofen. Attached to the letter was a scanned authorization form. My name was typed at the top, and at the bottom there was a signature. Not mine, Vera's handwriting. I knew it by the way she looped her L's, the way her V looked more like a pretentious checkmark than a letter. She had signed my name, submitted fake documentation, and used my medical identity to access funds that were never spent on me. I sat down slowly at my desk, the paper shaking in my hands. I could have collapsed right then, if not for the sudden steadiness I felt in my spine. She stole my health, I whispered aloud. to buy her image. There wasn't even rage at that point, only resolve. I began stacking everything I had, emails printed and labeled, the forged signature highlighted, the voice recording backed up 3 different ways. I scanned my father's letter. I filed the school doctor's notes. I backed up the draft email I'd found. Each document slipped into its own sleeve in a binder I labeled quietly in the corner. For the attorney. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't even about justice. It was about truth. A version of it that was no longer going to be denied oxygen. By evening, Isolde had stopped by again. She took one look at my desk and didn't speak. Instead, she opened her laptop, created a folder on the shared drive, and began uploading files without being asked. "This won't go away if you don't drag it into the light," she said calmly. "I know. And if you want people to believe it," she added, "you'll need more than just words. You need paper, dates, receipts." I nodded. The rest of the night was quiet, just the soft clicks of keyboard keys, the occasional rustle of a paper being turned over, and the slow building of a case 7 years in the making. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I wasn't even angry anymore, not in the way I used to be. What I felt now was surgical, strategic. She had gambled everything on me staying quiet. She'd banked on the idea that her charm, her reputation, her control over the narrative would outweigh whatever pain I had to endure. She was wrong. I looked down at the insurance letter once more, then tucked it neatly into its sleeve. I closed the binder with care, not slamming it shut, but pressing it closed like a door on a chapter that needed to end. She thought this was about keeping me quiet, I said softly to myself, but this is about to become public. My hands moved with purpose, scanning and uploading every document into an encrypted drive. I emailed a backup to Isolde. I printed out copies for my safe. I wasn't preparing for a confrontation. I was preparing for court. The proof was undeniable, and with it, I finally had the weapon to strike back. I filed the lawsuit on a Thursday morning, just after the courthouse opened. I walked in with a folder tucked under my arm and a strange sense of calm wrapped around my chest. Not peace, exactly, more like stillness before a storm you know has to come. The clerk at the window asked my name, then paused when she saw Vera Langford listed as the defendant. "Is that the same Langford from the hospital board?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just slid the documents forward and watched as the system swallowed her reputation into a case number. By the end of the day, my attorney, Ms. Hale, had confirmed our court date. "You're brave for doing this," she told me over the phone. "But remember, it won't be clean. It never is when family's involved." I already knew that. Nothing in my life with Vera had ever been clean. Everything came wrapped in bows of control, laced with guilt, sealed with silence. For the next 2 months, I worked side by side with Mrs. Hale to organize our evidence, emails, financial records, forged insurance claims, medical notes from Dr. Patel, the recording of Vera berating me at breakfast. Each piece of paper told a different part of the same story, one of erasure, of being invalidated, of a mother more concerned with her name than her daughter's future. Isolde testified to the conversations she had witnessed. Dr. Patel wrote a sworn affidavit backing his original medical concerns and stating clearly that Vera had ignored his repeated warnings. We were ready. The morning of the hearing, I stood outside Travis County Courthouse, staring up at the heavy limestone facade. It looked like it had been built to survive 100 years of secrets. I exhaled slowly, the air tight in my lungs, and walked in. Inside, Vera was already seated. She wore navy, as always. Understated jewelry, hair smoothed into her usual elegant bun. Her expression didn't flicker when she saw me. Callista sat beside her, legs crossed, flipping through her phone with the kind of practiced boredom that only the privileged learn to perfect. She didn't acknowledge me, not even a glance. Ms. Hale leaned in and whispered, "She's trying to play the unbothered card. Let her. It won't hold." When the session began, Vera's attorney went first. He painted a picture of a mother who had done her best. "Parenting isn't perfect," he said, "and sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. But there was never any malice." I wanted to laugh or scream, but instead, I kept my eyes forward and let the pages in front of me do the speaking. When Ms. Hale stood up, the courtroom shifted. She didn't speak with flair or theatrics. She just read. She read the emails from Dr. Patel, the forged insurance claim. She played the audio from my kitchen, Vera's voice filling the space like poison. You embarrass this family. She just wants people to feel sorry for her. She's never been strong. A hush fell over the room. Even Callista looked up from her phone. When the recording ended, you could hear someone exhale in the back row. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, the judge watching me with the kind of expression that waits before it judges. My voice shook only once. For most of my life, I began, my pain was treated like a performance, something to ignore, something inconvenient. I missed dances, I missed sports, I missed normal things, like walking through a grocery store without wincing. And every time I spoke up, I was told I was exaggerating, that it was all in my head. I paused, scanning the room. But it wasn't in my head. It was in my hip, where the joint had been failing for years. And the people who were supposed to protect me, the ones who say family means unconditional love, used that pain to protect themselves instead. The judge nodded once. I sat back down. Vera never spoke. Her attorney tried to rebut, tried to spin everything as misunderstanding, but the damage had already been done. Her words were on tape. Her signature was on the forged documents. Her silence had already said more than enough. The ruling came quickly. Vera was ordered to repay the full amount of the misused insurance funds. More importantly, she was permanently stripped of any legal or medical authority over my care. Callista stood abruptly and stormed out of the courtroom, heels clicking like gunfire across the marble floor. Vera didn't look at me. She just stared ahead, mouth tight, hands folded in her lap like a woman at a funeral who refuses to cry. Outside, the sun was blinding. Isolde met me on the courthouse steps and handed me a bottle of water. You did it, she said. I nodded, but something still felt unfinished. I walked back inside, past the hallway where we'd waited, past the courtroom, until I found Vera in the lobby, gathering her things. This is the last time, I said. She looked up, startled. What? This is the last time you get to decide anything for me. My life, my health, my story, that ends today. For a second, I thought she might respond, but she didn't. She just blinked, turned away, and walked out without another word. And I didn't follow. I stood there until the silence felt like mine. I thought that walking out of the courthouse would be the end, but I was wrong. It was a Sunday morning, quiet, gray, the kind that tempts you to believe nothing bad could possibly happen. I was in the kitchen of my apartment, slicing apples for a pie I hadn't baked in years. Something about the smell of cinnamon and butter made the space feel fuller, warmer. The windows were cracked open, the soft hum of the neighborhood seeping in. I was at peace. Then came the knock. It wasn't frantic, but it was firm, intentional. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. When I looked through the peephole, my breath caught. Vera, and standing beside her, arms folded, was Callista. 7 years. Not a word, not a letter, not a message. They had vanished after the court ruling, slipped into silence like they never existed. And now, here they were, dressed like they were going to brunch instead of staging an ambush. I opened the door only a few inches. Vera held out a bouquet of lilies, my least favorite, which she knew. Reagan, she said, voice soft, almost rehearsed. We were in the neighborhood and thought, maybe we could talk. Callista added, it's been a long time. We thought enough time had passed, families fight. But at the end of the day, we're still family, Vera finished. That has to count for something. I didn't invite them in, but I didn't slam the door either. Instead, I stepped outside onto the porch and shut the door gently behind me. The smell of baked apples trailed with me. You have 5 minutes, I said. They exchanged a look before Vera spoke again. You look well. Your place is nice. I didn't respond. Callista, never one to wait, cut to the chase. Look, we know things got messy, but you've done really well for yourself. We've seen the articles, the features. You're thriving. Vera nodded, placing the flowers on the porch railing like a peace offering. And we're proud of you, truly. That's why we're here, Callista continued, to reconnect, to move forward, maybe support each other again. There it was, the pivot, the moment where the apology bends into something else. I'm not interested in support, I said calmly. Callista smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Don't be like that, Reagan. We're not asking for anything huge, just a little help. Things haven't exactly been easy since the ruling. Mom's been dealing with some health issues, and I'm between contracts right now. Vera stepped in. It's just, with everything you've accomplished, it wouldn't even be a dent for you, and it would mean the world to us. I stared at them both, trying to find a trace of sincerity, but all I saw were old patterns in new packaging. You erased me, I said. You mocked me, gaslit me, and when I fought back, you disappeared. You don't get to reappear now and pretend we're a family. Vera's voice tightened. We were trying to protect you. No. You were trying to protect yourselves. Callista's mask dropped first. Don't be dramatic, Reagan. We're just asking for some help. That's what families do. I pulled out my phone and hit record without hesitation. You know what families also don't do? I said, eyes locked on hers. They don't steal insurance money. They don't forge signatures. They don't call you unstable on public television and then come back because the rent's due. Vera's face flushed. If you don't help us, she said quietly, we'll ruin you, the same way we always could. That was it. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, thank you, that's all I needed. And I turned around and went back inside, locking the door behind me. For the next few days, things stayed quiet. I almost convinced myself they wouldn't follow through, that even they had enough shame to back down. I was wrong. First came the online rumors, a Reddit thread from a burner account claiming I had fabricated my medical history for sympathy. Then came the anonymous emails to my speaking agent suggesting I had been a difficult patient with a long history of emotional instability. Then someone keyed my car, twice. The second time, they etched the word faker into the driver's side door. I didn't panic. I documented. I kept screenshots, filed reports, collected everything, and then I walked into the Austin Police Department with a folder. Inside was the audio recording of Vera's threat, the screenshots, the emails, the photos of the vandalism. I didn't go in crying. I went in calm. By the following week, I had a protective order in place. Vera and Callista were legally barred from contacting me, being within a certain distance of my home, or attempting to interfere with my professional reputation. The officer who delivered the order told me, "You're not the first daughter who's had to do this, but you might be the most prepared." That night, I sat on my couch, lights low, pie cooling on the counter, and stared out the window at the quiet street. 7 years later, they had tried to undo me again. But I wasn't that girl on the floor anymore. I was the woman who stood tall and called the law by name. They failed to destroy me again, but I wasn't done speaking. After the restraining order was served and the air finally cleared of their threats, something shifted inside me. Not the explosive kind of shift you might expect. It was quieter than that, like a door creaking open that had been swollen shut for years, and behind it, stillness, clarity. I returned to my usual routine, but the world didn't quite feel the same. Coffee tasted richer. My limbs moved without fear, and for once, my name wasn't attached to pain. It was attached to purpose. A few months later, I received an email. It was from the organizing committee of the National Patient Advocacy Conference. The subject line read, "Invitation to speak at NPA Global, Voices that Changed Systems." At first, I thought it was spam. I skimmed it with half interest, assuming it was a mass mailer. But then I saw the line. "Your story has reached far more people than you know. Would you consider sharing it from our stage this fall in Houston?" I read it twice, then a third time. I closed my laptop and didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a walk. I passed the bakery where I once overheard neighbors whispering about my episodes. I stopped at the bench near the old elementary school, the one where Dad used to wait for me with his sleeves rolled up and a juice box in hand. It was on that bench that I called Isolde. "You're doing it," she said before I even explained, "and I'll be there in the front row." I laughed, then cried, because even when everything around me had turned its back, Isolde never had. The conference was set for October. As the day approached, I found myself rehearsing, not just my speech, but how I'd stand, where I'd pause, how I'd breathe through the nerves. Public speaking wasn't new to me anymore, but this was different. This wasn't a panel. This wasn't a classroom. This was a stage where my truth would be amplified. The morning of, I stood backstage in a navy dress that hugged just enough and hid nothing. The scar on my hip, small now, a pale reminder, peeked through the slit in the side. I didn't cover it. I didn't hide from it. It was part of the story. When my name was called, the applause was polite but expectant. I walked to the podium, adjusted the mic, and let the room quiet. "My name is Reagan Marlowe," I began. "And when I was 17, I collapsed in front of my entire family." They laughed. A few heads tilted, unsure if I was joking. I was told I was dramatic, attention-seeking, that my pain was in my head. It took 3 years, a courtroom, and a total breakdown of trust to prove otherwise. I could see some eyes widen. I heard one throat clear. I continued. "I'm not here to blame. I'm here to name. To name what it feels like when your own family rewrites your truth. When doctors ignore you because someone else speaks louder. When your voice is constantly edited out of your own story." I clicked a button. Behind me, a slide showed my actual MRI, the one Vera had hidden. "This," I said, pointing to the image, "was called exaggeration." The next slide, the forged insurance form. "This was called love." Then, the email. Then, the audio recording. I didn't play it. I didn't need to. The words were transcribed in giant text behind me. "You embarrass this family. You just want people to feel sorry for you. She's never been strong." The room was silent. The worst pain I endured wasn't in my hip. It wasn't the physical tearing or the surgery or the therapy. It was this. Being told over and over again that my reality was just drama. A murmur moved through the crowd. People nodded. A few took notes. Some sat still as statues. I took a breath. But pain is real. And when someone tells you theirs is real, believe them. I let the pause linger. "Family," I said slowly, "is not where you're born. Family is the place where your truth is heard." That's when the applause came. Not soft, not polite, but standing, full-bodied. Some people clapped with both hands and a stomp of their foot, like they needed to shake the disbelief off their bones. I spotted Isolde in the third row. She wasn't clapping, she was crying. After the session ended, I was approached by a woman in her 60s. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "My granddaughter's been telling us her stomach hurts for months. Doctors said it was anxiety. I didn't believe her, but after hearing you—" She couldn't finish. I nodded gently. "There's still time to hear her." She squeezed my hand. That night, I returned to my hotel room, kicked off my heels, and stared out the 12th floor window overlooking downtown Houston. The city lights blinked softly, unaware of the speech that had just unfolded. I didn't miss Vera. I didn't wonder what she thought of all this. I didn't Google Callista or scroll through old posts. Their absence didn't ache anymore. It affirmed they weren't here because they couldn't survive a world where I had a microphone. And that's fine. The scars on my hip might never fade completely. Sometimes I still catch myself flinching when people say dramatic like it's an insult. But then I remember the faces I saw in the audience, the silence before the applause, the woman who left to call her granddaughter. I remember the email that started it all, the one that was never meant for me to see. And I remember that I had collapsed once, but now I stood tall, and no one would ever call me dramatic again. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who were supposed to protect us. Reagan's story isn't just about pain. It's about the power of reclaiming your voice when everyone else tried to silence it. Have you ever been told your pain wasn't real? That you were being too much? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful family stories that speak the truth behind closed doors.